Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very senior and accomplished and respected professional from Virginia, USA, Martha Mertz. Martha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Martha is the founder of Athena International. She's also the president and owner of Mayhood Mertz Investments Incorporated. So, Martha, let me start by asking you, how did your own leadership journey begin, and what led to the creation of the Athena leadership model?
Thank you, Ashutosh. It takes me way back to when I was a child. It began there. I grew up in a traditional family. My father was always the voice of authority in that family and outside of the family. And I noticed that my mother, who really yielded more influence than he did, was always in the background. And as I grew up and kept seeing this pattern, I started asking, why should women always take a back seat in the world? And why were women deferring to men? That was a question. It bothered me. So she told me, we simply don't talk about that. You see, it was a bit sensitive at the time, but I was concerned about that imbalance. And now, if you take a big leap 20 years forward, I began to hear that same question, but it was across our whole country. People were having a debate about what is the role for women in our society. It was unsettled at the time. Now, to your question about the inspiration for the Athena work that I've done, there's a good story. It started in 1980 when I was invited to become a member of a Chamber of Commerce board of directors, which was rare for women.
Yeah.
I was the only woman at the table. My opinions were quite different from my male colleagues. And so I decided if I could just bring a couple prominent women into that group, it would help me with the voices there. And so I nominated two women, and the president of the organization pulled me aside one day and privately told me, Martha, women aren't leaders.
Wow.
He told me that.
Amazing.
I can still hear his voice. And that, Ashutosh, was the catalyst to begin this Athena journey.
Amazing.
I thought we could honor one woman each year who were leaders so that they would become more visible to the people in that organization and to the community. And everything came from that. So let me just tell you what the criteria were for the award we created. It was called the Athena Award. 3 criteria. The first is that the recipient needed to achieve the highest level of professional excellence. That's one. The second is that they had to be giving their time and talent back to the community. It wasn't all about them. It was what good the impact they would have. And third, that they would open leadership opportunities for others, especially for women. Those were the values that we outlined at the beginning.
How amazing. Thank you for what you're doing. And I worked with so many women leaders, and I've often said, and I've written about it, that women make much better and much more ethical leaders, and I'm saying it on my show as well. But
Yeah.
moving on, Martha, given the amount of work you have done with so many leaders, and given the change in the way work is happening now in the world, what, in your view, are the most critical qualities future leaders need to cultivate?
That's a great question, and it's been at the heart of a lot of discussions internationally. And often the answers are about what to do on the path toward leadership, namely learning public speaking or joining networks or meeting the right people and the like. But Ashutosh, I would encourage people to take a step back and to cultivate a sense of self-awareness by looking within themselves and asking some pretty important questions like, who am I? And what do I value? And what are my goals? And am I trustworthy? And finally, I'll just say, am I honest? especially with myself, because those conversations with yourself are the most important. So in talking about leadership development, we often hurry past this exploration. But I will tell you, great leaders don't. They know their values and they use them as a guide for all kinds of decisions that they may face in the future. And we call this living authentically.
Absolutely. Very well said. So, what you're saying is the importance of self-awareness. But how do you help emerging leaders to develop a self-awareness skill, if I can use that term?
How do you help them? First of all, you need to model the very things that you'd like to teach these young people. You need to exemplify the kinds of values and behaviors and perspectives and so on that you wish to teach to these young people. And there are a lot of ways to do that. But one of the ways that we did was to find out how young people, especially women, acquire their leadership capabilities. And we looked at how women were leading and discovered a model that has become a seminal work about leadership. It's actually changed the way leadership is described. And during the course of this conversation, I hope to share with you the 8 principles that are incorporated into that model.
Well, why don't you talk about it now?
Okay, let me tell you how it happened.
Yeah.
Because because it was kind of an interesting turn. After this Athena Award was spreading across this country, I decided to start going to some of the award events. They were pretty big occasions in communities. And everybody showed up for those. And after a recipient would be announced, one time I heard a woman say, "I don't really see myself as a leader." I thought she was very humble. But the 4th time I heard that same statement, I thought something else was happening here. And so we decided to ask this question: how do women lead? And this would apply to your young people as well. How do they find these capacities to lead? And we did research on this. We got funding. We did surveys. We had experts to sift through the data, and we discovered that there were 8 different solid principles that these women were bringing to leadership. And I think that I have seen them throughout age ranges and stages of life as I've met a lot of these young women leaders. So I'd like to tell you, your listeners may wish to grab a pen and make note of the list that I will give you, because there are 8 principles. Okay, the most important one, the first on this list of 8, we call live authentically. And it's really centers around what I just told you. It says know who you are and to stay true to your values. I just want to say Shakespeare, reaching all the way back to Shakespeare, he said, "This above all, to know to thine own self be true." So it was wisdom for him. It's still wisdom for us. And it's the most important leadership quality. It's that knowing yourself. So then from there, we learned that these kinds of leaders are willing to learn constantly. There's curiosity, and then there's knowledge, and then it can lead to wisdom. And a part of learning is the art of listening, which is important for a leader. Learn constantly. Then next, there is build relationships. So people must engage with others and put and establish trust between them so that they can work together through whatever happens. Another is foster collaboration, where you welcome others to your work and advocate fiercely. Know what you are passionate about and then become your own champion for your beliefs.
Correct.
And another one is act courageously. This is dare to be heard. Show up, stand up and speak your truth.
Right.
They're occasionally needed, Ashutosh. I'm sure you know
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then give back. It's not all about what comes into you and
Correct.
all of those things. Give back by serving with generosity the community that has supported you. And finally, celebrate, which is harder to understand, but it's to remember and share the triumphs and the tragedies of our lives by coming together and memorializing those moments.
Very interesting.
So that's a lot to absorb, but
No,
let
I've
me
made a
just say
note of all
one
these
more
8
thing.
principles myself as well. But
Yes.
moving on, you have done a lot of work to support women's leadership. Tell me, how does Athena's emphasis on women's leadership differ from traditional leadership models that I'm sure you've come across?
We have, and that's an excellent question. The traditional model of leadership is actually taken from the military, and it's centuries old.
Yeah.
And it was, and it's a very successful model. It allows large groups of people to be unified, to be put together into groups, to think the same, to behave the same, and to find order with large groups of people. So that's the way that the traditional model looks like. And if you envision it, it's like a ladder. It's each person occupies a rung, and the way the rungs are arranged, the higher you get, the more authority and rank there is, and it's hierarchical, and that's the traditional model, and we all know it. It's in every organization virtually that surrounds us. So also long ago, women typically weren't invited to be on those ladders.
Yes.
And so they had to find completely different ways to be effective. And I call that the other side of leadership. And just to envision it, we have the ladder and we have the circle.
Fascinating. And Martha, how does storytelling, particularly stories of ordinary individuals achieving great things, play a role in leadership development?
Oh, that's so good, Ashutosh. You know that good stories produce vivid memories. So here's a story that will always remain vivid for me. We've all heard of Kathmandu, Nepal, right?
Yeah.
It's a tiny country just above India, kind of sandwiched in between China and India.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's home to 8 of the world's highest peaks, including the highest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest. Everybody knows that. It's just a gorgeous place. So I traveled there to meet an extraordinary woman who came from the slums in Mumbai and went on to become one of the wealthiest and most admired women in that part of the world.
Wow.
Even though we didn't speak the same language, I loved her aura and her elegance. Anyway, let me just tell you a little bit about what she had done. She first of all did things differently as a leader.
Yeah.
She cared deeply about the people who worked for her so much, and they knew that. So the work they did together went way beyond a job to become more like a family. And she obviously had found a winning capability because she was very, very successful.
Amazing.
So that's the story. I will never forget her. She's
And that's
vivid
a
in my
story.
mind.
Yeah, and that's a story which my viewers and listeners will also remember you having told that just now. And how does your model help usher leaders into a new paradigm of leadership that goes beyond traditional hierarchical structures?
Yes, well, it has to be emulated from within the workplace that they find themselves. So people will follow role models from the organizations, and the role models there have to be people who are exemplifying the very things that they want their employees and people who are working with them to exemplify as well. So people can't just give lip service to this is how I want you to be, this is what I want you to do, this is how you should behave and learn and that. That doesn't work. It has to be coming from the top. You can't be it if you can't see it.
Right.
And so people learn their values and the values of the company from the people who are in leadership positions. And for instance, there's kind of a big push these days for diversity in organizations. And the organization might say that they want to have this wonderful diversity, and but they don't. But if you can't see it at the top, they're not living it. And lots of times, what we see in this country is that the top end of leadership in companies, they're all the same type. They all look the same, and they stay kind of enveloped within their own hierarchy. But they might talk about diversity, but they're not exemplifying that.
Absolutely.
So the people at the top have to teach, by virtue of the way that they behave within their own companies, they have to teach that in order to be successful in spreading that around their company and really introducing the values.
What a great response. Thank you. My next question is, what is the role of failure in leadership development? And how do you encourage leaders to grow from setbacks?
I didn't hear the first part of your question.
I said, what is the role of failure in leadership development, and how do you encourage leaders to grow from setbacks?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Well, of course, no one succeeds at the first time that they try anything. Failure is actually a building block to achieve success. And so to understand that is important, especially for people starting out. It takes good judgment to take each step. If something doesn't work, it isn't always what that individual has done. Sometimes the market forces come along and blow things apart. Sometimes circumstances within their own family changes up what they can do. There's all kinds of ways to fail in an endeavor, but it shouldn't be taken personally. It's a learning block. You can learn from your failures. You can grow from your failures. It makes you stronger. You probably won't find yourself back in the same circumstances that produce that happening. And that's how you grow. That's how you grow as a leader, and that's how you teach others. Be sure not to become discouraged if something should happen that you didn't anticipate and it set you back. Because you're stronger now and you know more and you're wise.
Well said. Well said. And Martha, given today's situation of how the future of work is evolving, post the COVID, we've got hybrid work, we've got work from home. And I'm from a vintage where I used to believe walking around on the floor, meeting people or having a cup of coffee in the morning was a great way to be able to bond with people. I'd love to get your perspective on how do you see leadership changing in the next few years, given the fact that the way work is happening is changing, and how does Athena have to adapt some of its programs?
Oh, that's true. It's been rather abrupt and changing throughout the world, given the COVID virus and the restrictions that were imposed on everybody. So people discovered that they really liked to stay at home. They didn't really want to spend all the time commuting back and forth to work. And so they developed ways to be effective at home. And the key to all of that, Ashutosh, is technology. You have to become rather masterful at knowing how to make connections with people in new ways, and how to even communicate effectively in these new communication
Right.
paths
Right.
and stay up to date with the technologies as they change and as they proliferate.
Hmm.
Because because that's the world that we live in. So
Hmm.
how do you lead in that environment? Well, there are multitudes of classes that have grown up out of this
Correct.
problem that we had.
Absolutely.
And young people today are much more adept at all of this technology than people of my generation.
Absolutely.
Um, but we try to stay together, and there are ways to do the same things. We build
Hmm.
relationships,
Hmm.
we collaborate, we interact we provide responsibilities and share them. And we tell people what we are feeling about things, where maybe we're a little more emotionally open
Hmm.
because we can't be together.
Hmm.
So because we can't be together, we have to find new ways to bond and build these relationships
Hmm.
and advocate for the ideas that we wish to promulgate. So
What a great
those
response.
are ways that
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that and probably we're not finished with that.
Hmm.
Probably there will be new innovations that will be coming that haven't happened yet that the young people
Yeah.
will charge forward with.
Absolutely. Well said. So I have time for two more questions. My next question is, what advice would you give leaders who are struggling with imposter syndrome or self-doubt?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've got a story to tell you
Hmm.
about.
Yeah.
It's short, but it will give you an idea.
Hmm.
Um, in my book, Living Athena, I write about a very eminent woman. Her name is Peggy McIntosh.
Hmm.
She came to an Athena program one
Hmm.
time and talked about the mad woman in the attic. And that certainly got our attention.
Hmm.
The mad woman was her euphemism for those background voices in our heads that
Hmm.
suggest that we aren't good enough. Um, Lots and lots and lots of women
Hmm.
have this self undermining of one's confidence voice in their head. I'm not
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
So that same Peggy McIntosh wrote a paper she called Feeling Like a Fraud,
Hmm.
because a lot of times people who get to the highest levels start wondering why it's them. Why are they
Correct.
there? What have they, what's so wonderful about them? And they feel
Absolutely.
that they're not the right person to be sitting in that
Hmm.
high
Hmm.
place. But people have to learn to trust what they know about themselves,
Yeah.
and to stay with their values, and if they feel like a fraud, that they can take that little woman in the attic
Hmm.
and put her aside and just go
Hmm.
forward confident in
Hmm.
themselves.
Well said. Well said. And I love this story that you just shared with us. And my last question for you, Martha, what is your vision for the future of leadership? And how can we inspire the next generation to lead with purpose and integrity?
Well, I would to my vision for the future of leadership is that it will be balanced in terms of voices of all kinds of balance, so
Hmm.
that it's like a tapestry in a way, Ashutosh.
Right.
You weave together all of these different perspectives and capabilities
Hmm.
and so on, and you ultimately end up with a much stronger outcome.
Hmm.
So I think that's the vision that I would have for leadership. Let me tell you that um, the kinds of things that we did
Hmm.
to inspire young people
Hmm.
is to uh, lean on a quote from Plato.
Hmm.
He said, "What is honored in a country will be cultivated there."
Hmm.
So Plato came up with this idea that we inspire people by giving honor
Hmm.
to those things that they are doing that are honorable.
Right.
And when we do that, when we honor that kind of work, then it cultivates more of it. And it cultivates others to watch that person and to emulate the very behaviors that we're talking about. So actually, Plato's quote was the original inspiration for the whole entire Athena journey.
Wow.
What is honored in a country will be cultivated there.
Amazing.
And I hope people will remember that,
Yeah.
because it's old wisdom, but it's very relevant today.
Very interesting. And on that note, Martha, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me. I just love the 8 principles, and I'm going to read them out again for our audience. Live authentically, learn constantly, listen, foster collaboration, advocate fiercely, act courageously, give back, and celebrate. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey about Athena. We spoke about a lot of aspects of leadership. We spoke about critical qualities of leadership. We spoke about the role of self-awareness. I loved your comments on women's leadership. I really enjoyed the stories and how you emphasize the need for good storytelling when it comes to leadership. Thank you for speaking to me about the role of failure, about imposter syndrome, and finally about the future of leadership. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I'm so grateful to have been with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.